me about that. I was working here at Junior. Um, so you were talking about your growing up, your childhood. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Northern Virginia outside of DC and really studied more music growing up and only got into performing because my mom put me in the children's choir at my church because I was painfully shy as a child and she was trying to help me with that. And I actually only got involved with theater through community theater at my church. And didn't ever do theater even at my high school either, and only did community theater until I got to college. And thankfully in college, even though I was double majoring in music when I first got there, but thankfully I got into the musical the first spring semester. It was called The Triumph of Love. It's a lesser known musical, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, why am I not? Wait, this needs to be my other major. I had to stick with vocal performance because I was on partial scholarship for that. But then I switched my choral education to musical theater. Yeah.
Now, you have a baby and a husband. How do you balance that with being a Broadway star?
Well, it is a whole new world because there is just so much more that is even more unpredictable in my life than even before. You know, I feel like life is generally pretty unpredictable as it is, but babies really add a lot of, surprises to life, and sometimes your nights of sleep, or your daily activities. So thankfully, we found a great daycare. So she's in partial daycare, and it's thankfully my husband is he's a very active co-parent. And so we both know that it's kind of all hands on deck, and we know that there's a lot of give and take. When he's a little bit busier, then I have to really give a little more, and then when I have a lot going on, like for instance, last week or the prior week, I went on 6 times in 1 week, which part of it was unexpected, right? And for Dusty, the role of Dusty, which is Julianne, and so that happening very suddenly, my husband had to kind of take care of more of the baby stuff, and now, because I had to put a lot of focus and energy into the show, of course, and it's like being a standby is a very unique thing.
And I mean, a lot of my friends are understudies on Broadway. Some of my friends are understudies. Like I have a friend now who's the understudy for Jasmine.
Oh, cool.
And she's been doing it since the show started 8 years ago.
Wow.
And she never left.
Wow, yeah.
And another of my friends is covering Chris Sieber in company right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a lot of friends who are understudies right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of understudies, you understudy 3 roles like my friend Callie. How do you keep your roles separate? Do you use different binders, color coding? notebook. I know my friend Allie uses different notebooks for every character.
Yeah. I think, everyone has different methods. One of the other standbys, Jennifer Fouché, will never forget the first day she went to stage management and she said she covers 4 roles. There's 4 of the 4 older women of the show. And she asked for a separate script for each track. And so there was this pile of scripts that, were brought back to her. I highlighted with different colors, but I think, I don't know, I think it's because, even though this is my Broadway debut, regionally I've done plays where I've had really significant scripts to learn. Like, there was actually a play here at the Public called The Chinese Lady that my amazing friend Shannon Tayo won tons of awards for, and it's a brilliant play. I actually did that play in Milwaukee a few years ago, and it's almost a one-woman show. And so it's monologue after monologue after monologue, and there's no one to save you, right? And so I think that play plus another play that I co-wrote this past year, there are plays where I've had to get used to learning a lot of text. And so thankfully that muscle for my brain has I don't know, been toned in that way of like really just retaining a lot of text. And being in rehearsal with everyone, we, as the standbys, we observed. And actually a lot of times, because of COVID, we would jump in pretty regularly during rehearsal. But really watching and listening and observing and like learning our lines while watching, I kind of learned by osmosis. And then sometimes would start running the lines track by track. Yeah.
How are your parents very supportive of you?
Remember, this is on film.
I know. It's okay, they're not on social media. I think that they are proud of me. I don't think they're not theater people. I am the only really artistic person in my family. Definitely, he has a deep appreciation for music and theater, which is great. But thankfully, he's not in the industry, so we talk about other things too, which is also great. And I can get an outside perspective too, which is really valuable sometimes. But my family, I think they're as supportive as they can be, but it's like, I don't know if my family's ever really watched the Tony Awards. I think, they don't really know anything about the industry. They don't know shows or people.
Did they come to see you when you
They did actually come, thankfully. Recently, I think my sister I have one sister, and she kind of headed the charge, recognizing, this is a pretty big deal. So some of my mom and sister and some of my extended family were able to see me go on recently, which was very, very special.
How many times have your husband seen Otis?
How many times has he seen Otis? I think he's maybe seen it 7 times now. Because the thing is, he saw it during previews he saw it once during previews already, and then he saw it again during previews with his dad because they visited. But then, what was it, like 4 days later, I ended up going on. And so then he of course came that for my Broadway debut, and then he came for my last show that week. Maybe he came another time, but he at least came twice that first week I was on. And then he came to opening night because it was the big, opening night performance. We all got dressed up, so he came to that. So that was already 5 times just when we opened and see the show. And then when I went on again recently, he saw the show. He saw it another 2 times. Because I went on suddenly, so he came then because he'd been seeing a show every Wednesday matinee because we had daycare and he was off on summer break. So then he came and saw me go on a Wednesday matinee, and then he saw me on that Saturday. So it was just, it was, so that's 7 times. He's seen the show 7 times, and he's going to come to closing at least. So.
Does it make you nervous when families in the audience?
Oh, not family, no. Thankfully I don't get too nervous per se. I get really excited. I mean, if I wasn't prepared, I would probably be nervous, right? But yeah. Yeah?
Never ever.
Wow.
No, I'm the one that calms everybody down. Without giving anything away, can you tell a brief synopsis of what Otis is about?
Brief synopsis
Yeah.
of what Otis is about without giving anything away.
Well, I think, the title is like its own little drop of a synopsis in and of itself, right? It's, POTUS, or, 7 women behind one great dumbass trying to keep them alive, right? And so that really is part of what to expect, is that there are these 7 women who are running the White House. And I think the wonderful thing about the show is how different each of the women are, what important roles they all play, both within the White House and also in the world, in our society, symbolically who they represent in our country. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a farce. It is silly, it's crazy, it's so smart. And maybe the hardest you'll ever laugh in a theater.
Without the give that idol away, what positions do they have in the administration?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't think that gives anything away, really. It's, there's his chief of staff, the press secretary, who's who? Julie White is the chief of staff. Susie Nakamura is the press secretary. Vanessa Williams is FLOTUS, or the first lady. Leah Delaria is his sister. Lily Cooper is a White House journalist. Yeah, she's amazing. Oh, really? Well, you'll meet her soon. Julianne is an outsider visiting the White House. And Rachel Dratch is the presidential secretary.
But there's no president in the show, right?
Well, you have to
Just
see.
women.
You'll have to see.
From what I read, there's no president. Maybe there is.
You'll have to see.
Your closing on the 18th or the 14th.
14.
Yeah.
This
This
month.
month.
So soon.
Anything up to you next?
Well, there's a lot of projects that I've been working on that kind of got put on hold. Well, that's, I think that'll be the case for the next 18 years. But so there's a podcast that actually my husband and I have been producing since during the pandemic, and it's a sitcom podcast called Preschool. So we've been actually recording it with a lot of really amazing theater people throughout the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, some of the people in it are, gosh, I have to remember because we haven't worked on it in a while. Some dear friends, in theater. Anita Welch, friend Mark Levasseur, Elle Morgan, who was nominated for the Tony in Strange Loop, Jonathan Christopher, who's on tour with Hamilton up north, in Canada right now. Oh my gosh, Stacia Fernandez, who we did the off-Broadway show Einstein's Dreams together, but she also, gosh, what was she in? She was in, she was like in 5 different Broadway shows that I cannot remember them all. And a few other people, who am I blanking on? It's been a while since I've worked on the podcast because I've been focusing so much on this. So we're continuing to edit and record for that. So that's something we're trying to launch. But I also, so during the pandemic, I started writing. And the first show I co-wrote got produced at the New Ohio Theater. And we performed. It was a co-writer and I performed it while 8 months pregnant. And that was called Kim Lou Gets a Redo. And it's in part about the first Asian Americans who ever performed on Broadway. But it also is kind of interspersed with some of my and my co-writers' contemporary writings in reflection of the Atlanta shootings and being Asian American women in today's society and how there are parallels between what those women back then kind of had to go through to perform on Broadway and what we do have now, things like that. But I also co-wrote another play called The Porch on Windy Hill, and we actually did a production at Ivoryton Playhouse in Connecticut this past fall. And so we have another production happening in Chicago this next winter, which is pretty exciting. So we're going to be working on some rewrites for that. But I also got a grant for a different musical that I've now being commissioned to write with a different writing partner friend, which is very cool. And then this musical is about women of the Wild West era, and kind of taking the concept behind the Wild West shows, which were really about feats of strength with men. It was all men and them showing off these feats of strength, and so showcasing women of that era and their strength too. So that's another thing. So there's a lot.
You do have a lot going on.
Yeah, and then I'll also be auditioning. So yeah.
I just want to thank you again for doing this. See you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
That's how
Yes.
we bring things up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing it.
Oh my gosh, of course. My pleasure.
We have to